Do do dee do 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 dee do 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 dee do. Oh, oh my webcam's back to doing this shit now, huh? Yeah. What's going on, everybody? Hope you're having a good evening so far. Today is the day for a Chaos Head NOAH stream. So let's see. I guess the big thing that happened in my last stream of this visual novel is that the suspect for the crucified murder has been arrested. It's not any like specific character in the visual novel. It's just some random 25-year-old dude. So Bon is still investigating some stuff, though. I think he's gone a little too far down the whole GE rate rabbit hole to just stop now that one of the killers, or we don't know if he's the killer or if he's just one of several killers involved with there's, what is it, 8 now, I think? 8 different murders that have happened in Shibuya. Let's see, which one of these do I want? I think it's this one. So his latest, I guess, stop in his investigation was the, well, it was a Garofroggy shop, apparently. I don't know. He seems to think that Garofroggy is somehow connected to the GE rate. I guess because he noticed that the GE rate seems to spike during the weekends, and he also noticed that a lot of people go to buy Garofroggies on the weekends, so I don't know, seems kind of silly. I mean, especially when you consider, like, the new one is dropped, the new Garofroggies are dropped on Fridays, so it makes sense that the sales would pick up during the weekend. So why he thinks this is related to the GE rate, I don't know, but let's see what else would happened. Oh, I think before all that, I think we finished up Takumi's visit to the hospital, where he intended to meet up with Ayase. Ayase was not in her room when they first got there. And then Rimi had also, like, split from them, and they waited a bit, but neither one of them showed up, so they both decided to try and look for Rimi. And then Takumi came across this, like, black wall in the hospital that, like, gave him a bunch of, well, it gave him a really bad headache and pain and shit, and he was like, in fact, he was in so much pain that he ended up trying to approach the nurse, but the nurse ended up getting pulled off on some other deal. But after the nurse had left, he looked at the papers that she had been writing on and found that there was nothing but the same drawing on each page over and over again. And it was... oh yeah, it was a drawing, it was a depiction of the crucified murder. So yeah, that's pretty weird. It reminded me of that scene from The Shining where Johnny's wife finds all the like pages that he had been typing up, and they all the pages just said all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy or whatever. Over and over again. And yeah, I think that's about it. So we left off here after the scene where Bon was visiting the Garo Froggy store. So Misumi and I parted ways at the station, and I headed back to the base. Oh, also I forgot to say, after he had the deal where he saw the pages, he did end up meeting up with ISA, and then ISA went into a whole spiel about you know, the Knights of whatever, I forgot the the name that she uses, but yeah, she was like saying, like, I guess Takumi is one of the knights, and Senna, I think, is one of the knights as well. There's like 7 of them. There's supposed to be 7, and she thinks they're all in Shibuya now, although she doesn't know the identity of all of them. She didn't say if she herself was a knight, but I'm guessing she is. And then maybe Kazupi is a knight. I'm not sure. She didn't mention Kazupi, but yeah, apparently she went on for about like half an hour about this stuff. Misumi left like 2 or 3 minutes into it. And then after that, they finally found Rimi again, and Rimi apparently got slapped by ISA, and Misumi and Takumi both had actually witnessed it, but Rimi didn't really want to talk about whatever had happened with ISA, so yeah. And then I'm assuming this scene is after they left the hospital, so the whole time it felt like I was wandering in a nightmare. I kept... Oh, yeah, okay, I also forgot while he was at the hospital, he got a phone call and heard Nanami's voice say that she wanted her hand back, which doesn't make sense because he saw Nanami earlier and she had both of her hands, so I don't know what the fuck's going on there, but I kept seeing Nanami's face flickering in and out of my mind, a different expression on it each time. Nanami was the type whose feelings always showed on her face. When she was mad, she'd puff out her cheeks. When she was happy, she'd grin so much it made you embarrassed to look at her. All those expressions in my memories came back to me one by one. It made me feel sick. What was that call? What had Nanami meant? Was the bandage I'd seen on her arm at school... Where was she now? At school? Or had she gone home?
ほら、前見て歩かないと転んじゃうよ。
With Rimi's help, I made it up to the roof.
あの
Yeah, we'll just overwrite this one.
どうしたの？
これから実家に帰ってみようと思うんだ。
これから？急だね。
歩いても30分もかからないところなんだ。それで一緒についてきてほしい。
Damn, he wants her to meet his parents. I felt so nervous as I asked her that I thought my heart would burst out of my chest. I was a little surprised that I was able to get the words out. I'd never been able to ask anyone for anything before.
それって。
Rimi seemed lost in thought.
もしかして、ご両親に紹介するみたいな流れ？
は？
Rimi said something so ridiculous my mouth fell open.
だとしたら、心の準備がまだ。
違う。そうじゃなくて。
And suddenly, a high-pitched sound stabbed my ears. It was like a girl's scream. I don't know, are we having another one? Already? Another earthquake? Another magnetic storm or whatever? Oh, shit. The wind blew hard. The air shook around me. A crimson light blinded me. I turned toward the source of the light, unsure of what was going on. There, on top of the shipping crate, I looked up and saw Senna Aoi holding her D-sword in her hand. Oh, it's just Senna. Okay. Not too big a deal. The light was coming from the flashing D-sword, but something was strange. The last time I saw it, Senna's D-sword had been flashing with a blue light. The sound quickly disappeared. Good lord. The wind stopped.
答える。
Her voice was sharp. Her gaze was cold. I could see murder in her eyes.
これを書いたのはお前か？
Oh yeah, that's right. She had just been at his place and she found that poem or whatever it is that that Takumi wrote way back in like elementary school. She was holding the essay with the IR2 equation scribbled on the back. It was all wrinkled, like someone had crumpled it up. Why would Senna have that? Why would she even be here? The words breaking and entering came into my mind, and I realized that she'd been in my room. But why?
答えろと言っている。
そうだけど、だから。
たくみさん。
Now it was Kazupi's voice. She was behind Senna's back. She was clinging to Senna's leg and poking her head out at me. Her expression was incredibly tense. Wait, what? Why we gotta run from Senna?
え？
Just as Kazupi shouted, Senna jumped. She raised the sword. Rimi yanked me hard and I fell backwards. I looked up at the place where I'd just been standing. Senna's sword had torn a chunk out of the ground. Its sharpness and destructive power were almost unreal. The impact had been enough to shatter concrete, but the blade was unharmed. I thought the D-swords were supposed to be invisible, and you couldn't even touch them. Then I remembered what I'd heard before. The sword must have been real booted. The four of us here had a shared awareness of Senna's D-sword. It wasn't a delusion anymore. It was real. It was a huge sword with the power to cut someone in half. If Rimi hadn't pulled me back, the beautiful blade would have sliced into me, head first, and I'd have died instantly. Bro, is the IR2 thing really enough for her to, like, want to kill Takumi? What the fuck? Bro, you need to fucking chill out, dude. My whole body started to shake. Senna had just tried to kill me. Why? My mind was filled with questions. Not too long ago, she, Kazupi, and I had all been eating Garugari-kun popsicles together. We certainly weren't close enough that I could call her a friend, and she'd still scared me. But it certainly didn't feel like she was going to attack me on sight with a D-sword.
殺してやる。
Bro, what the fuck? Senna looked up, glaring at me. She moved fast, even though she was carrying that huge weapon. She got into a crouch like a sprinter at the starting line and began to run. The tip of the blade tore into the ground as she got closer and closer, and when she was close enough, she raised it high above her head. My instincts told me in an instant what was going on. She was serious. Senna was serious. I was lying on the ground, staring up, helpless and pathetic. I screamed. I couldn't escape. This was just so unfair. So sudden. How could it suddenly be game over like this? All that time I'd spent running away from Shogun, and now I'd die to a surprise attack from Senna. No, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. And then someone leapt between us, standing between me and Senna. I realized it was Rimi. She was standing between me and Senna, with her arms spread out wide to block her path. Was she putting herself in danger to protect me?
どけ。
But Rimi, you'll die. I don't want that.
先畑さんには気をつけて。
Suddenly, I remembered what Kazupi had said before. Pale light began to pour out from between Rimi's spread arms.
先畑さんはよくわかんないのら。
Rimi,
タクに手を出さないで。
brought her hands together around the streaming rays of light. The air shook around us. Shining feathers of light appeared from out of nowhere and began to dance around Rimi. And in her hands, I saw...
だと
Senna had brought her huge D-sword down with full force, but she easily blocked it.
タクを追い詰めないで。
The thing in her hands was far too elegant, far too holy to be called a sword. It was like the wings of an angel. And then I understood. She, Rimi Sakihata, was also a gigalomaniac. I mean, I guess that kind of makes sense, since she was hanging around Shogun and shit. Senna Aoi was looking at her in sheer astonishment. The winged sword that had so easily blocked her own weapon was clearly a D-sword. And if she hadn't used it many times before, she wouldn't have been able to block Senna's attack so easily.
先畑さんもギガロマニアックスだったのら。
Kozue was looking down at them from on top of the shipping container, as if she was a spectator watching a game. Her legs were dangling off the side. Senna was more than a little annoyed at her behavior, considering how she just ruined her surprise attack. But her gaze was locked to her front on Rimi. Rimi's expression was pained. Takumi Nishijo was lying on the ground behind her, moaning in shock. Senna was only after him. She wasn't here to fight Rimi. This wasn't a manga or anime. It wasn't realistic at all to try and fight someone with a D-sword.
その男が何をしたか知っているのか IR2 という公式を
知ってるよ。
She cut Senna off. Her answer was calm and sad, but clearly spoken. When she heard this, Senna's grip on her blade tightened even further.
それなら
タクを覚醒させればもっと大変なことになる。
Okay. I think we now know why Rimi had been trying to manipulate Takumi into paying no mind to Shogun. Apparently she is afraid that if he keeps worrying about Shogun, that he will awaken, and she doesn't want Takumi to awaken.
その前に殺す
あなたには無理だよ。
Senna decided it wasn't worth trying to talk anymore. She brought her weapon lower, ready to strike with it. Rimi, however, was simply standing there. With long strides, she could be there in 5 steps. 3 seconds would be all it took. Senna didn't hesitate. She charged straight at Rimi. She slashed with her D-sword. Rimi tried to block it just as she did before, but Senna's attack was a feint. The blade passed through Rimi's sword and her body. She'd cancelled the real boot. Right now, Senna's D-sword was just a delusion. It couldn't touch anything. It couldn't cut anything. It couldn't kill anyone. But that was just what Senna wanted. Rimi had been ready to block the blade and was caught off guard for an instant. By the time she figured out what happened, Senna had already slipped past her and was just 2 steps away from Takumi. It only took an instant to do another real boot. Now, Takumi's terror-stricken eyes were pointed straight at Senna. It made the real boot easy. The D-sword, now real again, was only inches from piercing Takumi's heart.
Senna.
She saw someone in the corner of her vision. When she heard the voice, it stirred violent emotions within her. Her aim missed, and the blade only grazed Takumi's leg before slamming into the concrete next to him. Senna slowly looked up and gasped. A man was standing at the edge of the roof, the sun setting behind him, his countenance like a ghost. His face was pale and ashen. His eyes were bloodshot and sunk deep into his head. His head was slumped forward and expressionless. When she saw him, Senna stopped caring about Takumi at all. It was the man Senna had chased for so long, the man she hated, the man who had abandoned her and betrayed her family. Her father? And now he was right in front of her.
ようやく見つけた。
Senna took a step toward him. She gritted her teeth to keep the hate welling up within her from taking control. She readied her D-sword again. She took another step.
どうしようもなかった。私はお前の母さんを生贄に捧げるしかなかったんだ。
黙れ。
母さんの最後はとても安らかなものだったよ。だからセナ、安心してほしい。母さんのおかげで素晴らしい実験結果が出た。母さんは世界のために役立ったんだ。お前も母さんの功績を誇っていい。
黙れよ。
The blood rushed to Senna's head. The man was now all she could see. She ran. She got there in an instant. Senna closed the distance between them in the blink of an eye, and when she was close enough, stabbed the D-sword deep into his body. This had been Senna's most fervent wish. She'd spent every day wandering Shibuya, just so she could someday kill him. She dreamed of killing him almost every night.
やっと母さんの仇を。
She tried to pull out the sword. She tried to back away from him, but the sword wouldn't come out. The man fell forward and embraced her.
よせ、気安く触るな。
All the hairs on her body stood up in revulsion. It was far too late for this. The bond between Senna and her father had long since been cut, but for some reason, she was shocked to find that she couldn't push him away. His warmth, his big, broad chest, the reality of having her father here, right in front of her. Senna's hands were turning red.
私はこんなの。
あなた
前が望んだ妄想だ。
望んだ妄想だよ。
She heard whispering, and then she knew. Errors slipped into dead spots. Psychic attacks. Illusions. Her delusions had been read. By the time she realized what had happened, it was too late. She'd lost her balance, and both her and the man fell off the edge of the roof. The ground 8 stories beneath her seemed so far away. All I could do was watch without understanding at all what was going on. Senna suddenly ran toward the edge of the roof, and then, for no reason, lost her balance and began to fall. Her body was just about to disappear off the edge.
落ちる。
Wait a second. Does that mean... Does that mean, Takumi can't see her father there? All I could do was whisper. I closed my eyes tightly. Suicide. Senna was going to kill herself by throwing herself off the roof. I didn't know why. I didn't want to know. She'd attacked me for no reason, and now she'd been punished. She'd turned out to be an enemy too. But no matter how much I waited, I didn't hear the sound of her hitting the ground. Nervously, I opened my eyes to see what was going on.
あ、
Senna hadn't fallen. She was slumped over, and Rimi was right next to her. Rimi was holding onto her arm. Had Rimi saved her? Senna had thrown away her D-sword and was crying like a little girl. What had just happened? As near as I could tell, Senna had just tried to kill herself.
辛い思いさせてごめんね。でもしょうがなかったの。
What had Rimi done to Senna? she was like a totally different person than the cheerful Rimi I knew. Her face was pained. Her voice was sad. There were tears in her eyes. The girl in front of me wasn't the Rimi I knew. I heard a voice in my mind. Kazupi was still watching us from on top of the shipping crate.
もう終了だよね。もしもセナさんのことぐしゃばきってしようとしてるならカズピ許さないぽん。崎畑さんのことバラバラにしちゃうよ。
A cold chill ran down my spine. Kazupi was still using her cheerful anime voice, but I could tell she was serious.
もう終わり。もともと葵さんのことどうこうするつもりはないし、タクの前から消えてくれるならこのまま解放する。それは無理だってコズピーとセナさんとタクミちゃんはお友達だもん。
I don't think Senna is friends with Takumi now. I think that is over at this point.
そうでしょタクミさん。
I couldn't think about anything. If you told me everything that just happened was a dream, I'm sure I would have believed it. Why had Senna attacked me anyway? Was Senna my enemy after all?
お前のせいだ。
Senna looked up at me, her face filled with tears. She was still slumped over, and she hadn't even tried to wipe away the tears. She was staring at me with anger in her eyes.
お前のせいで私の家族は。
I was confused. I could feel her raw emotions. Wait a second. Are you saying that the IR2 formula thing is what her father did all those experiments for? Yeah, but even then, dude, like, you can't blame Takumi for that. Like, how the fuck was he supposed to know? But what had I done? I'd never bothered anybody. I didn't even know Senna's family. I was completely harmless.
無害だと。
She'd read my mind.
お前が生み出したものが世界を滅ぼすかもしれないっていうのに。
Destroy the world? Was she just another crazy person who'd read too much manga? I turned to Rimi for help, but Rimi had her back to me and was looking out toward the evening sky.
無駄だよ。
The way she looked, her voice, was it just me? Or did she seem so very, very sad?
タクは何も知らないから。
but it sounded like Remy knew everything.
ふざけるな。今渋谷を襲っている混乱は全部あの公式が発端なんだぞ。
Formula.
それ以上言わないで。タクは本当に何も知らないの。
It felt like they were talking about me, but I couldn't follow the conversation at all.
公式ってこれのこと？
Kazupi came down from her perch on the shipping crate, carrying my essay. On the back of it were the scribbles I'd done as a boy. IR2. This was the cause of everything that was happening in Shibuya? Ridiculous. How could a bunch of scribblings on paper have that kind of power? I'd just drawn them to kill some time, I think. It was so long ago I couldn't really remember, but they didn't mean anything at all. I'd just written down the numbers I'd seen in my dream. It was a dream that had something to do with the subject of my essay, whose eyes are those. I'd used that phrase for a long time, and then one day, I'd started to see it more and more clearly in my dreams. And in those dreams, I'd seen the numbers.
FUN の10乗かける INT の40乗イコール IR2。
Senna finally wiped away her tears. Her eyes were red. She kept talking, still slumped on the ground, looking at me with anger and frustration in her eyes.
この公式をお前が生み出した瞬間、世界は分岐したんだ。
NOAH 2に搭載されている中で最も秀でているのは、中核システムに組み込まれたとある方程式です。これは人類史上未だ回答が見つかっていないとされているもの。
ミレニアム7のうちの一つかね。
The Millennium 7. Oh wait, are they talking about that list of problems that people get like, what, $1 million for if they're able to solve it? There's still like, I don't know, 4 or 5 left on there that still haven't been solved yet or something. That, yeah, the Millennium Prize problems, yeah. Yeah, only as of 2007, only one had been solved. Well, I think, yeah, I think there was a second one that was solved. I don't know exactly when, but after 2007, I guess. Pretty sure there is no fun to the 10 times into the 40th power equal IR2 on there, though. Or anything even resembling that. Oh, well. Shit, I guess I was wrong. There really has only been one of them, even today, that's been solved. Maybe, I don't know, maybe... whatever that solution was they came up for the second problem, like, ended up being wrong or something. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, no, there's fucking nothing in the Millennium Prize problems like this. Plus, I mean, how would this even be a like unsolved problem? Like it literally just looks like a basic linear equation. Anyway,
億単位の懸賞金がかけられているという数学界で未だ未解決の7つの問題か。
いいえ、その7つの中には入っていません。
yeah, it does say here that back in 2010 there was a solution offered for one of the problems, but later it was proved that it was a false solution. Anyway. No, it's not one of the 7.
ですが、実はミレニアム7はもともと問題が8つあって、公開前に1つだけ削除されたのです。
Okay, so this is supposed to be the 8th problem?
それがノア2に組み込まれている方程式だと。
削除された理由は？
世界に最悪をまき散らす可能性があるためというところです。
Bro, come on now. It's ridiculous.
一体どのような数式なのだ？
基本相互作用における電磁気力を想定した共鳴現象。それを表す計算式です。
Describes a type of resonance phenomenon. Fundamental interactions of electromagnetic forces.
これにより特定の電磁パルスと受容体とが近接作用することで発現する未知の力が解明されました。
Unknown power. So what was was Takumi like a genius? Like a genius child and then he like forgot or something?
各国が30年以上かけて開発し積み上げてきた沈黙の兵器の研究成果を一瞬にして過去のものとしてしまったんですよ。
その問題に回答を見つけた者は神になるに等しいというわけだ。
それを君が果たしたというわけかね。
それはとても不思議な場所から見つかりました。子供の落書きというね。IR2 ノア2のいわゆるハードウェア部分はこの公式によって神に匹敵する能力を手に入れました。
Well, I don't know. Like Takumi said, he saw this in a dream, so like where this dream came from, who knows?
あとはソフトウェア部分に相当するギガロマニアックスのコードサンプルを集めれば
Code samples from gigalomaniacs that form software.
ノア2は本格的に稼働し我々の望むもの全てを実現してくれるでしょう。
かのアインシュタインが現代に生きていればと思うよ。彼は高い能力を持つギガロマニアックスだったと聞く。
家庭の話よりも現状がどうなっているかだ。ギガロマニアックスは世界中に数えるほどしかいないというではないか。大丈夫なのか。
すでに5人分のサンプルは確保しました。
Okay, but like, first of all, how did they even discover this essay that Takumi wrote when he was a child? Like, how? I don't know. I don't know how. Anyway.
ノア2稼働に十分な数は集まったようだね。
ならば結構。
ただサンプルが多ければ多いほどノア2の能力は向上します。特にどうしてもサンプルを採取したいギガロマニアックスの少年が一人いましてね。
だからといって計画の遅延は許されんぞ。
ノア2の本格稼働はいつ頃になりそうなのかね。
稼働前に最終実験としてサードメルトを行います。
また地震を起こそうと。
予測規模は
想定では関東大震災と同レベル。
関東大震災クラスだと。
マグニチュード 7.9 だったかな。
現在の建築基準と免震対策レベルを考えれば町にかつてほどの大きな損害を及ぼすことはないでしょ
う。だが犠牲者の数はファーストセカンドの日ではなかろう。
Okay, I'm guessing this earthquake slash geomagnetic event that occurred a couple weeks ago in the story was the second melt.
およそ5000人ほどといったところです。少なく見積もってですが問題が。
責任は貴様が取るのだろうな。
腹でも切って死んでみせますか。これが最終実験です。サードメルトが予定通りの成果を上げたとき ノア2は完全なる完成を見る。世界の可能性は我らの手の中に。
この公式をお前が生み出した瞬間、世界は分岐したんだ。
分岐って。
Wait, this isn't an H game.
タク、もう行こう。話聞く必要なんてないよ。
Remy grabbed me by the hand and tried to pull me into the room. I could sense her desperation. She was afraid of something.
葵さんが言ってることは全部嘘っぱちだし。
嘘はそっちだろ。
葵さん、もう帰って。タクの前から消えてよ。
Who was I supposed to believe?
たかが数式になんでそんなに目くじら立てるんだよ。
本当に何も分かってないのか。アインシュタインが唱えた E=MC の事情、これが発表されたことで核兵器が開発されるという未来が生まれたように。お前の生み出した IR2 もまた E=MC の事情と同じ、いやそれ以上の影響力を世界に与えている。 IR2 は沈黙の兵器を現実のものとした。
沈黙の兵器。
思考盗撮、視覚投影、五感制御。
Those were the technologies that Senna had told me about before, the ones in the patent.
ギガロマニアックスは特別。いや、異常ではなくなる。これからはこの忌々しい力を誰もが自由に使えるようになるんだ。IR2 を元に作られた装置によってな。もっとも、その前に一握りの腐った連中に独占され、人々は気づかないうちに家畜同然の立場になるよう洗脳されてしまうだろうが。
I didn't know anything about any of this. I had no idea. Even if what Senna said was true, I'd never meant to make anything like that. I was just a kid scribbling on a paper. I hadn't done anything wrong.
そのアイアーム2は
IR2。
それはギガロマニアックスの力のことをキュッピーンって説明したものなんだ。やっぱりあのおじさんが言ってたのは本当だったのら。一番重要なのはその目、誰の目を生み出した少年なんだって。それってたくみちゃんのコートだったんだね。
Kazupi's voice was cheerful, but I wasn't as innocent and pure as she was. Remy said nothing, but Senna, her eyes wide, suddenly looked up and staggered to her feet. Why did she seem like she was having trouble walking? Was it because of whatever Remy had done to her?
小杖。 お前、今なんて言った？
ホビ？
Senna began to storm toward a stunned Kazupi.
おじしゃんって誰のことだ？
コズピーに理想度の大切さを教えてくれた人。東京に来て初めて話した人なの。なんかね、ふぎゅーって鼻つまみたくなっちゃう格好してて、へんてこなこと書いた板持ってたの。世界は終わるとかとか。
It's the homeless dude, yeah.
なんでそれを早く言わなかった？
そんなこと言われて
も。あいつだ。やっと見つけた。
Bro, she just found her father. Now there's some other dude. She just... Bro, how many fucking people is she searching for? Neither me, nor Rimi, nor Kazupi had any idea what she was talking about. All we could do was watch as an intense fury descended on her.
私はやっとあいつを殺す。
Okay, well, apparently this girl wants to fucking kill a lot of people. An experiment had been performed, but she never knew. She was a normal housewife, close to turning 40, newly pregnant with her second child. No, maybe she wasn't quite normal. Her first daughter was already only a year away from high school, so there would be an almost 15-year gap between her children. She was worried that her daughter, who was currently going through puberty, would rebel against having a younger sister. But in fact, her daughter was overjoyed. Her husband was a scientist, and between his faith and his research, only rarely came home. But whenever he was home, he did his best to be a good father and a good husband. So, while she certainly had her complaints, her love for her husband was firm. The second child was born uneventfully. She was a healthy young girl who weighed 2,579 grams at birth. She named the girl Mana. Unfortunately, after that, her husband was transferred to a new location far away from home. Her husband wouldn't last a week without someone to do the chores and make the food, so she had no choice but to send her older daughter along with him. She was now alone with her newborn daughter, Mana. At her husband's suggestion, the two of them moved into housing owned by the company he worked for, so rent was extremely low. Her family had originally lived in a condo in the suburbs, but it was far from the city center and hard to get anywhere. The dorm, however, was located right in the heart of Shibuya, and many of her husband's colleagues lived nearby. She'd have easy access to childcare, and if anything came up, she'd have people around who could help her. The place was extremely spacious. The bedroom especially was a favorite of hers. A huge mirror covered a whole wall, and on the other side, there was a big window. From there, you could look down into Yoyogi Park. She quickly became friends with the ladies in the nearby residences, and the corporate benefits even included a maid. She was proud that her husband was important enough in the company for her to have all these benefits, and was more than satisfied with her life of luxury. 2 years passed. Mana's development was a little slow, but she was growing up without suffering any major illnesses. She was, however, a very needy child. If she wasn't constantly held at her mother's breast, she'd start crying immediately. For the past month or so, Mana's mother hadn't been feeling well at all. The ringing in her ears was the worst part. It bothered her almost the whole day. But still, she couldn't let the maid or the lady next door take care of Mana. Mana couldn't stand to be away from her for a second. Not in the bathroom, not when taking a bath. Whenever she thought of letting the maid hold her for a second, Mana would somehow know and start crying. It was, in a way, endearing to have the young child so reliant on her, but it also meant that she couldn't leave the house for an instant. The maid and her neighbor, though, were there to help. She was so lucky to have met them. Of course, things were gradually getting strange with them, too. A week ago, she'd been talking with her neighbor in the living room, when the woman had suddenly started to vomit without warning. She'd quickly fled afterward, running outside of the house. Mana's mother hadn't seen the neighbor at all after that, so perhaps she'd gotten sick. Mana's mother then decided to ask her maid to go check on the neighbor. The maid was just finishing up for the day when she'd made the request. When she'd finished it with, "And I'll see you tomorrow," the maid suddenly began to cry. The maid just nodded over and over again before leaving. And that night, Mana's mother suffered terribly as the ringing in her ears got even more violent than before, and the pain threatened to split her head open. She tried to call an ambulance, but the phones didn't work. She tried to go get the neighbor lady to help, but even that was too difficult. Her daughter started to cry violently, and the crying made the pain worse. She held Mana tight to her chest, enduring the pain. Suddenly, the crying and the ringing in her ears stopped. The pain in her head was gone, like it had never been there. She looked down and saw she was holding the shriveled corpse of a child. Before she realized that the whole thing was an experiment, her mind broke into a million pieces. Oh no. So that was an experiment her husband did, I guess? An experiment had been performed, but it wasn't what he had expected it to be. He was a scientist at Nozomi Technologies and a believer in the cosmic church of the divine light. He was one of the key figures behind Nozomi Tech's secret Project NOAH, and the one who'd solved the riddle of fun to the 10 power x int to the 40 power equals IR2. You know, I guess that could be an L instead of a capital I, but I'm not sure. He had offered his pregnant wife as a test subject for the experiment. It was a direct order from the church's leader, a person he admired deeply. But he had also been the one to suggest it, to make the experiment a success. It was called the Mana experiment, after the code name given to his wife's daughter. His older daughter was given to a church facility, while he monitored his sequestered wife and Mana 24 hours a day. What his wife had thought was a company-owned condo was, in fact, a Nozomi Technologies testing facility, and the location of the NOAH 2 prototype that he was working on. Mind reading, induced hallucinations, sensory control. His wife and daughter would be used to test the efficacy of these technologies here in this sealed lab. The effects of electromagnetic radiation on the body were ill understood, and he had planned to cancel the experiments if anything unusual happened to his wife and daughter. An accident occurred almost immediately. Mana died roughly a month after being born. The cause of her death was unknown. It was an accident, one that nobody could prevent. He was deeply saddened and tried to cancel the experiment, but that wasn't going to happen.
実に興味深いではないですか。
That's what his employer had said. The man had been looking at the strange goings-on in the test lab. His wife had refused to accept the reality of her daughter's death and treated her corpse like it was still alive. In fact, from his wife's perspective, she was. This was an effect of the NOAH 2 prototype, and in a sense, the perfect chance to test its abilities. His feelings on the matter were irrelevant, and before long, he too began to feel that his wife would be better off if the experiment continued. As he watched his wife through the one-way mirror, cradling his daughter's corpse, it seemed like she was happy with her life. She'd stare at the wallpaper on the opposite side, which looked to her like a window overlooking Yoyogi Park, and whisper softly to her daughter. 2 of the research staff took care of her. One would pretend to be a maid, the other, the lady next door. As long as this experiment continued, his wife's mind would be just fine. This was, he told himself, what was best for her. Perhaps his mind had broken before hers. And the more time passed, the more his goal changed from the completion of NOAH 2 to keeping his wife locked within her dream. And then, after almost 2 years, his employer's words suddenly brought all that to an end.
データは十分取れました。NOAH 2本格稼働は間近です。この実験ももう続ける意味はないでしょう。
He fought back as hard as he could, but as a result, he was branded a traitor and removed from the project. As a final thanks for his service, he was allowed to be in the experiment room, hands tied on the day it was shut down. How is that thanks? What the fuck? His daughter, whom he hadn't seen for nearly 2 years, had been brought there as well. When she saw him, she seemed confused.
父さん、これはどういうこと？母さんに何をしたの？
That's Senna.
母さんが抱いているのは一体。
He couldn't answer. The guilt kept him from even looking her in the eye. The horrible ceremony was about to begin. The neighbor lady had already become unable to tolerate the stench, and the maid had run out of the lab, weeping at his wife's words. The device was shut down, the dream ended, and his wife broke. At the sight of her daughter suddenly turning into a desiccated corpse, at least that's how it must have seemed to her, she snapped, tearing out her hair and ripping the skin off her face with her nails. She began to laugh madly, slamming her face again and again into the walls, before grabbing a knife and killing herself by stabbing out her own eyes. Holy fuck. Her daughter was screaming and crying as she watched her mother's last moments through the one-way mirror. The lab staff grabbed his daughter by the arms and dragged her off somewhere. He didn't know where. He wasn't even allowed to follow the only family he had left.
すまない。すまない。
He blamed himself. It was all his fault. Whatever his reasons, when he'd opted to continue the experiment 2 years prior, It had been obvious that this was how it was going to end. Several days after watching his wife's death, he disappeared. Nobody knew where he was now. Senna had ended up running off on her own after angrily asking Kazupi some kind of question. Kazupi had gone after Senna. I had no idea what had made her suddenly go crazy. Now I was slowly trudging through Shimokitazawa. I was almost home. It wasn't even 30 minutes from the base. Was Nanami there? Shimokitazawa's streets were busy, though not as busy as Shibuya. The psychic boy incident was still fresh in people's memories. Some would point and laugh at me, while others would even take pictures with their cell phones. I hurried home as fast as I could, suffering the feelings of embarrassment and humiliation.
ごめんね。
Rimi was walking a little behind me, her eyes locked on the ground below her as she whispered. She'd said that at least 10 times on the way here.
黙ってて。ごめん。
There was nothing I could say. I didn't understand Rimi. That had always been the case. Rimi had been there to support me. She'd been there for me. But there was so much about her I didn't understand. Until now, I'd always opted to just ignore it. Maybe that was because it felt like if any of those things I didn't understand ever came out in the open, Rimi would go away. And I was afraid of that.
どうして僕と一緒にいてくれるの？
I managed to work up the courage to ask that single question. Why would Rimi want to be anywhere near a guy like me? Was it because she was like Yua and trying to set me up for a fall? But the answer wasn't what I expected.
あなたに目覚めてほしくないの。普通の生活を送ってほしかった。
She didn't want me to wake up? To awaken as a gigalomaniac? Is that what she meant? Rimi knew more about me than I did myself.
一体君は何者なの？
私は
Rimi hesitated.
私はタクの友達だって思ってる。友達でいたいな。
Did that mean she didn't want me to ask any more questions? But I had to ask.
僕はギガロマニアックスなの。
そうとも言えるし、違うとも言える。
Which was it? Was she trying to confuse me?
君は IR2 のこと知ってたの？
たことがあるだけ。
She didn't say who told her about it.
セナが言ってたのは本当なの？
嘘だよ。
She was lying. She was lying when she said it was a lie. I could tell just by looking at her.
君は
I went to ask her another question, but stopped. Was Remy on my side? Or my enemy? If I asked and got the wrong answer, she might leave me forever. So I couldn't ask. If I just pretended nothing had happened, if I just let her lie to me, everything could go back to how it was before. That'd be easier. I'd be happier that way. Maybe. Yeah, I should just do that. I could pretend to be an idiot. I could just let her keep lying to me. She'd saved me enough times that she probably wasn't going to hurt me in the future. All I had to do was give her what she wanted and lead a normal life.
ありがとう。
I looked away from her and thanked her instead of asking her a question.
守ってくれて。
タク。
I couldn't think of anything else to say, so I just silently followed the path home. Soon, I came to a street I recognized. It was in a cramped, quiet neighborhood. Once in a while, you could hear the sound of the trains in the distance. I'd known this place since I was a little kid. This was where I'd grown up. I'd followed this same road to elementary school and to middle school. I just had to turn down the narrow street in front of me, and home would be right there. I was scared to face Nanami, but I had to see whether her arm was still attached. I stopped and took a deep breath to calm myself. Then I went to take a step forward when...
待って。
I turned back to see that Remy was looking at me. She was on the verge of tears.
どうしても行くの？ねえ、行かないで。もう普通じゃいられなくなるよ。私そんなの嫌だな。
What did that mean?
帰ろう。あのコンテナハウスに帰ろう。私タクが望む限りずっと一緒にいるから。それで一緒に学校に行って大臣と3人で他愛もない話をして、帰りに立ち食いそば屋さんとか CD ショップとかに寄って、そうやってこれからもやっていこうよ。
僕はナナミに会わなくちゃ。
いないよ、きっと。
How would she know? Was she lying again? Was there a reason she didn't want me going to my parents' house?
私タクの悲しむ顔見たくない。
Not again.
もう謎かけみたいなことはやめてよ。
I was just sick of it all. Was I supposed to just never understand what's going on around me? I couldn't keep playing dumb even if I wanted to. Everybody kept throwing mysteries in my face. I just wanted to remain ignorant.
実家に行っちゃいけない理由があるなら言ってよ。こんな中途半端なのうんざりなんだ。
Sick of it? I was the one who'd always decided to do things halfway, wasn't I? I was the one who'd run away from things. That's right. I should just keep on doing what I've always been doing. I should just go home. Rimi was right. I didn't need to see Nanami. If I went to see her, and she was missing her right hand, what was I even supposed to do about it? It'd be my fault, wouldn't it? Nanami would hate me. She'd despise me. I'd be the loser who couldn't save his little sister. I'd know for sure just how pathetic I was. If I kept everything vague and uncertain, I wouldn't feel guilty. Yeah, I should just do that. That was the best move. Don't look at anything. No matter how many mysteries people shoved in my face, I could just ignore them all. I could hide myself away from the whole world.
ほんと世話が焼けるな。ナナがいないとなんにもできないんだから。
ダメだ。
In my head, I heard Nanami's bright, cheerful voice.
ダメだよ。
If I ran away here, I'd never be able to face Nanami again. I'd never be able to come here again.
タク、
I clenched my fists and stepped onto the narrow street that led to my old home. It was less than 50 meters away. At first, my pace was brisk. Then I ran. I headed toward the home where I'd grown up. 30 meters, 20 meters, 10 meters, 0 meters. And the house I knew so well wasn't there.
あれ
The name on the plate was different. It didn't say Nishijo. The house looked different too. It was much nicer, much newer than the house I'd lived in. I looked around. I thought maybe I'd just stopped at the wrong house. But I was wrong. And besides that, nothing around me matched what I remembered. I thought for a moment that maybe I'd gotten lost or gone down the wrong street, but that was impossible. Everything on the way here had been just as I remembered it. The path here was the same. But my home wasn't here. I'd followed the path in my memories, but what I remembered being here wasn't here at all. Instead, it was something else. I was seeing something new. I should know this place well, but it was like I was coming here for the first time.
斜面ビューだ。
違うよ。
Rimi was standing right behind me. Her words were an instant rejection.
この世界にタクの帰る場所はないの。
Dude, this visual novel is fucking relentless, dude. It's like every single scene now is like this huge fucking plot twist or revelation or something. Like every single fucking scene. Okay, so now Takumi's entire past as we know it has been thrown into question. Okay. So what I'm thinking is that okay. I guess this would explain why Takumi doesn't seem to... It seems to have like this huge gap in his memory. So I'm thinking that at some point during his life, his whole memory got like completely erased and then replaced with like another person's memories. So this child that like discovered the formula or whatever, that's actually just memories from a completely different person. No. It's a theory. Also, I guess Nanami's whole existence is now a question as well. Anyway, let's keep going before this creaking noise gets really annoying. The light from the setting sun fell into the hospital hallway. This time of day was particularly dark. It was just before night fell, and the lights hadn't been turned on yet. The chaos and noise of dinner time had subsided, and an almost eerie silence descended in its place. Shogun was slowly moving down the hallway in his wheelchair. The sound of the creaking wheels echoed throughout the corridor. He passed several nurses on the way, but none of them looked at him or spoke. Shogun, for his part, didn't seem to find this unusual at all. Frail hands, seemingly made of nothing but skin and bones, turned the wheels again and again. As he passed one of the rooms, a patient named Yamai began to scream. He pointed at Shogun, shouting frantically. There happened to be a nurse in his room. She looked terribly confused.
アミちゃんが帰ってきたよ。またお外に出かけてたんだ。いけないんだ。
誰もいませんよ。
The nurse looked around and chuckled. Shogun was right in front of her with his wheelchair, but still, she said nobody was there.
また山井さんは私のことからかってるんでしょう。でも今日は騙されませんからね。
So I guess Shogun is another person slash thing that only gigalomaniacs can see.
アミちゃん、ラウミちゃん、タウミちゃん。
Yamai kept screaming and getting angrier and angrier. Shogun ignored him and continued down the hallway, turning right. The cream-colored wall suddenly became black. Shogun didn't hesitate for even a moment before the wall. He kept going forward, and just before it seemed like he would hit it, the wall vanished. It simply disappeared and revealed the hallway behind it. Shogun kept going forward. The hallway went on for about 20 more meters before ending, this time for real. There was a single door which opened into a room. Shogun opened the door and went inside. It was a room that didn't exist. The one that there'd been rumors and ghost stories about in the hospital for years. And the name on the plate outside the door was... Wait. So maybe that's it then. Shogun is the person whose memories got put into Takumi's mind. I mean, it's either that or Shogun is actually just Takumi, like, from the future or something. Okay, well. I don't know what it is, but it looks like Shogun and Takumi are somehow linked. I don't know if it's like their minds are linked or what, but... yeah. God damn, I don't know, but this just keeps throwing more and more questions out. Yeah. Holy, I mean, it's actually crazy how many questions this visual novel has got to answer by the end of this story, because holy fuck, dude. This is just getting insane now. The sky outside the train car was turning dark. The Yamanote line car was packed with salarymen heading home from work and students heading home from school. Yua Kusunoki and Yasuji Ban were standing next to each other, hanging on to the straps as the train rumbled and shook. They made a strange pair. and Yua had been glancing around for a while now to see if they had attracted anyone's attention. She kept fiddling nervously with her hair and glasses. She'd just met Bon a few days ago and wasn't up to making friendly conversation with him. There was only one stop between Harajuku and Shibuya, but the 3 minutes it took to go between them felt far, far longer than it usually did. Bon was silently looking out the window. He made no attempt to speak to her. In Yua's mind, Bon wasn't a bad person, but he was a little scary. She'd met several police officers after what had happened with her sister, and didn't have a high opinion of any of them. Maybe that's what made her feel awkward around Bon. That was how she saw it anyway.
だから地下15階の番人倒せば隠しダンジョン行けるだろ、常識的に考えて。
万人どこにいるかわからんなり。
Ugh. Two men standing near the doors had been talking in loud voices ever since she'd got on at Harajuku. They were making no effort to avoid disturbing the other passengers, and Yua was forced to listen to their conversation.
マップの左端の方だよ。一目でわかるだろ、番人。
っていうか、万人と警官の区別つかないぞな、もし。
いやいや、どう見ても番人だろ。どこが警官なんだよ。番人は銃持ってねえよ。
They were wearing unfashionable clothes, with bandanas on their heads. They wore fingerless gloves and had tightly packed backpacks on their backs. They were the type commonly called otaku. As an anime and manga fan herself, Yua wasn't really bothered by their appearance. But she'd never been to Akihabara before, and she'd never seen someone dressed like such a stereotypical otaku before. She took a few glances at this rare sight before realizing how rude she was being. She quickly looked away. In the seat in front of her was a teenage girl with brown hair and a blue blazer. She was typing into her phone, her fingers done up with gaudy fake nails. Every time she moved her fingers, the strap-on phone dangled. It had a tiny plastic gun at the end of it. Yua saw what the girl was writing. The girl was holding it at a bizarrely flat angle. It was almost as if she was trying to make sure Yua saw it. Went to a party last night with this cop, and it sucked. Lamest old dude I ever met. Hope he dies. Yua was the girl's age, but she couldn't understand it at all. It was probably just how some girls talked when they were on the phone, but to her it looked like some kind of code. Suddenly, a child's voice echoed loudly through the car. Yua turned toward this voice in surprise. It was a 5-year-old kid standing next to Bon. He was holding a toy water pistol and pointing it at Bon. He was pulling the trigger, but water wasn't coming out. Bon gave the child a grin. His eyes weren't laughing at all, but the child didn't seem scared in the slightest. Someone who appeared to be the child's mother came over. She bowed shallowly in Bon's direction. The mother's voice was stern, but all she was doing was warning him. She didn't try to take the gun or make him put it down.
バンバンバン。
あ、本当にすいません。
ああ、構いませんよ。
バンバンバン。
おじさんが困ってるでしょう、ノブ君。
Something seemed really strange about the whole scene to Yua. The mother was making an angry face at her child and looking apologetically at Bon, but that was all.
バンバンバン。
やめなさい、怒るわよ。
バンバンバン。
The child seemed completely oblivious to her pleas. He kept repeating the same phrase over and over again, like a broken toy. His mother still wasn't making any real effort to stop him.
本当にすいません。
バンバンバン。
Bon, for some reason, made no effort to stop the child.
バンバンバン。
This continued all the way to Shibuya. Alright. I will be right back. Alright guys, I think I'm gonna stop here for tonight. So I am not going to be able to stream tomorrow. My next stream will be 2 days from now on Friday. And we'll do Chaos Head NOAH again on Friday. So I'll see y'all then. Have a good night.